so fucking tired all the time. I swear, if someone shot me now, I'd be happy.
The fourth season of Love Hate is not regarded by any as the best, and some people think it's genuinely bad. Speaking personally, I know one person who stopped watching the show at this point, and another person who caught a few episodes this season on television and dismissed the show entirely. As for me, I was underwhelmed by this season when I first saw it, although there's a caveat. I somehow managed to skip episode 5 without realizing it, and didn't notice till I rewatched the whole show, so at first viewing, I wasn't a fan, but I sort of shot myself in the foot by not watching it properly. All I had to do was sit in front of a screen and look at it, and I still managed to find a way to do that wrong. Nonetheless, after a couple of rewatches, I have sort of come around to it. However, myself and the people that dislike this season are in agreement on something. Not a whole lot happens, but that is kind of why I like it. What the season builds towards is anticlimactic in many ways. However, there is one aspect of it which I feel is purposefully anticlimactic and I enjoy it, but the rest undeniably is anticlimactic. I think where the season fundamentally falls down is by not doing something each and every other season does. According to Stuart Carolan, he attempted to close each season with the idea that were the show to end there, it could. And I have witnessed this working. In our house, we only had the first 3 DVDs, and my dad took them with him, and he thought it ended there. He only found out later that it went on for another 2 years. One would assume the idea from Carolan's perspective was not banking on another season being greenlit in the first couple of years. However, by the time of the 4th season, this is pretty much the most viewed thing in Irish television history. And around 1 million people are watching this thing, which for context is maybe 1 in 5 people, and those figures didn't include people like me who were working in the pirate sector. This is when you start seeing really crap Facebook memes, which were a bit of fun at the time. You get a police review when a Garda named Kieran plays a Garda called Kieran. Still not the worst thing Martin Callanan did in his time as Garda Commissioner. The Irish Dental Association feels compelled to distance itself from how dentists are portrayed in this show. And you get outcry over the silliest things like a cat being killed. They actually got this cat to appear on the Late Late Show to alleviate people's concerns. This was the season airing when I remember Love Hate being discussed most widely, which is amusing because this is the season least remarked upon since the show ended. But when you've got a crowd so big you get loopers who can't tell, no animals were harmed in the making of this production, it's safe to assume Stuart Carolan could think beyond just one season. While the weaker aspects of the first season could have been attributed to RTE not having enough faith in the project, and certainly we love to blame everything on RTE, at this stage, with strong reviews and increased revenue from DVD sales, you have to imagine he is getting to make exactly the show he wants to make. With this in mind, this is the only season where rather than thinking about the next 6 episodes, Carolan was thinking about the next 12. He said in an FM 104 interview that he envisaged season 4 and 5 as one story. That being said, for many reasons, I think it might have been better to do one big 12 episode season and call it a day, or at the very least do the final season in 2 parts as was done with The Sopranos and Breaking Bad. Because when you get to the end of this season, it tries to show some form of an end to the story, but there isn't as much story to end, and there's still threads left dangling. So yes, this season is slower paced, it's not as tense, it's at times more like a collection of scenes and little stories rather than one large narrative, and the characters finish the season in largely the same position as they were in when the season started. However, in talking about this, Stuart Carolan used an analogy about vegetables and dessert. The audience think they just want desserts, i.e. big moments like character deaths, people getting off with each other, revelations and arrests, but too many of those are bad for the show. And you need a certain amount of establishing and bedding in. And this idea is to be admired. Certainly shows that keep ramping things up tend to burn out, like with Weeds, which burned out quite literally with a season finale that involved a gigantic fire, and from which the show never recovered. Or maybe it did. I gave up on it soon after. So yes, season 3 was firing on all cylinders, but it is perhaps a bit greedy after it to say, you've just made one of the best seasons of television in this country's history. Can you do it again, please? But having said that, in the case of season 4, there is some great stuff here. This season has some of the best moments, some great ideas, it introduces some good new characters, it has some of the best quotes.
Fuck you, Nolly. I'm pissing on your ma.
And this is also the season where Nidge is at his nidgiest.
Please, just let him go, will you?
What'd you do? Someone in that didn't pay their bills, you'd call it guards, wouldn't you? Yeah.
But if I'm honest, what my enjoyment of this season might boil to is this, if nothing else. In trilogies, whether they're the best or not, the middle chapter tends to be the most enjoyable, because as opposed to the first, which sets everything up, or the last, which tears everything down, the middle is always the one where you're just thrown into the story and you get to spend time with the characters you like instead of spending time establishing stories or bringing them to an end. And this season is like that. It is the one where the least amount of consequential stuff happens. And amusingly enough, since this is Ireland, in between 3rd and 5th years of high stress and tension, year 4 is the transition year, or in Irish, fresh on Nidgerbhliain, for better or for worse. So shall we begin?
Yeah, fuck it, let's do it.
The season begins with two teenagers, Wayne and Ginny, playing with a submachine gun. Wayne tells Ginny he's been given the gun to mine for a job taking someone out. He asks who, and then it cuts to Nidge. And then, the same moment happens again an episode later with two Gardai. One tells the other he's taking someone down. He asks who, and it cuts to Nidge. And I feel like previous seasons would have put these two scenes back to back.
Come on, tell me. Who is he I have to clip?
Taking someone down. Who's the target?
Both these scenes establish the people after Nidge this season. Wayne working with Lizzy and Danno's behalf, and the police on behalf of, well, the rule of law, I guess. So it is a departure, I think, that they're not both set up in the first programme. Each previous season and the season subsequent to it set at their stall in the first episode, but the police putting their case together, the thing which takes up most of this season, isn't established till episode 2. We meet Moynihan in the first episode, but he doesn't get the team together till the second. So why are Wayne and Ginny the first people we meet? Bearing in mind the very last frame of this show before this was Darren's corpse, so a lot of thought would have been put into what we see first in series 4. Well, in another FM 104 interview, Stuart Carolan mentioned something he wanted to accomplish with this season was to address a concern he had that young boys saw something glamorous about this show and the lifestyle it portrays, and this being an impetus for him to tell a story involving teenagers. Now, in previous videos I've alluded to finding this whole story involving Wayne and what it attempts to say about teenagers in this world to be a massive letdown. It appears that perhaps I was wrong. When this story wraps up with Ginny shooting Wayne, I always thought that Ginny killed Wayne for laughing at him for falling off his bike. However, it appears from reading about it that Wayne was killed on Nidge's orders. For one, for his part in the IRA's attempt on his life, and for two, for knowing too much about Nidge's failed hit on Patrick. But there is no scene of Nidge ordering this. There is a scene of Wayne laughing at Ginny for falling off his bike. So the programme showed and didn't tell. Something on which television did more. And it went over my head, and it went over others too. Bernice Harrison's review in the Irish Times drew the same initial conclusion I did. So I guess I'm a bit sore about not getting it, but I have to take in consideration Carolan's comments about wanting to get a message across to younger viewers, because if that was the intention, I think this might be one of the few things the Kin did better.
Exactly. You're a hypocrite.
Like it or loathe it, the first episode of Kin tells a very straight to the point story about teenagers getting involved in this stuff. Amanda and Jimmy's son Jamie has effectively dropped out of school, and questions are being asked about whether he'll go to college or go to work. He insists he wants to go into their line of work. Amanda is staunchly opposed. Jimmy wants to give him a chance. However, after going out once with his dad and seeing what's involved, Jamie recognises it's not what he wants, and he fills out a CAO form for colleges. But at the episode's end, standing next to his cousin is enough to get him killed. Now, some may say this is all well-trodden territory. Personally, I think this little story is better than that, but I'll save that for the Kin video. But it's short and to the point, and it does get the cautionary tale across in parlance kids could understand. But with the story of Wayne, I think it's just too ambiguous if the target audience is teenagers. I think what's probably most effective is Wayne looks like a bit of a tit posing with the gun. But also, my problem is I wanted to see Nidge get some comeuppance for getting a teenager involved in this. Like, he's giving him money, letting him and his friend have a few drinks, putting him in life-threatening situations. It's sick, and if Nidge is the one who orders Wayne killed, it doesn't seem to wear on him at all. In the case of Tommy, Darren and Janet, Nidge's role in their fates weighs on him massively, but with Wayne, after his shooting we see Nidge looking distressed with a cigarette, and that's it. And I just don't think the full storytelling potential of getting young people involved in this is tapped into. Certainly things one could point to was the 20-year-old man in 2008 who dug his own grave before being shot in the head, and many more gruesome examples. As to whether or not teenagers could take any message from this story, for anyone who missed it, a few years ago TV3 did a reality TV show about a bunch of supermodels who ran a Garda station. It was called Inside the K. In it, a member of An Garda Síochána said,
Like, we're seeing 13 or 14 year olds walking around in Canadian Goose jackets worth nearly €1,000, like.
This was in reference to the gifts bestowed upon children in these areas, and it was part of a point being made that it's a form of grooming and it is beyond creepy. However, that whole message seemed to go over a lot of kids' heads. They took the voice clip of the policeman saying,
Like, we're seeing 13 or 14 year olds walking around in Canadian Goose jackets worth nearly €1,000, like.
and they put it over TikToks of them in their jackets. C'est la vie.
Hold on. Now get the flashlight, yeah? Get the flashlight.
Right, and I get the flash, right? That's without the flash.
No, get one with the flash.
Right, how do I do it with the flash?
So while the season doesn't show its whole hand in the debut episode, that's not entirely a criticism, because this leaves space for the thing which takes up most of the first episode, the tiger kidnapping. From the previous season, we can see the gang gets their money from drug dealing, debt collecting, and running a brothel. Now we see another source of their income. Nidge has a guy on the inside who drives the van, with the man whose family has been kidnapped. His job is to feign the role of the supporting colleague and to ensure the money is brought to the right location. Nidge and Elmo follow the van, while a group headed by Fran kidnaps the family till the money changes hands. The location they're taken to is a ghost estate. These abandoned unfinished housing estates were all over the place at the time. RTE did a documentary about the people who actually lived in them. The people who bought these houses were shown brochures of what the neighbourhood would look like when each house was built. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by bandos. It's been said the memory of the stark image of these uninhabited ghost towns contributed to the government's slow response to the housing crisis Ireland currently faces, if high demand and low supply meant the likes of this wouldn't be seen again. With this setting, this really does feel Ireland in recession in a way previous seasons didn't, and it is the sort of thing I was on the lookout for when I said the show perhaps didn't acknowledge the recession as much as it could. It is also a kidnapper's dream, in that someone can run for miles and not be seen. The show also does a good job of acknowledging the economic situation with the character we meet after the kidnapping. After the kidnapping, the gang meets at the brothel. While there, Nidge is brought in to deal with a customer who's gotten sick and had an altercation with Janet, and this is where we meet Andrew. Up until now, everyone we meet would seemingly be here even if there was no economic downturn, and it just seemed like an opportunity missed because there are stories to be told about the sort of characters who turn to crime because of it, and Andrew is one of these characters. We definitely would not be meeting this guy without the recession. Andrew is a man who lost out by going into property, and there are so many people in this country like him. Sure, even we can see the actor here being interviewed by Brendan O'Connor, who in 2007 wrote, "The smart ballsy guys are buying up property right now," in his Sunday Independent article entitled, "The smart palsy guys are buying up property right now." And while it is not explicitly stated by Andrew or his wife, this is potentially why they're separated. Money troubles can lead to that. He clearly still has feelings for his wife, despite his dismissiveness of her not working. You can see this in how he reacts to the prospect of her going out on a date, or how he is with her possessions. Perhaps because he wishes to be back with his wife, that rather than seek a more meaningful relationship, he just chooses to get off with prostitutes to keep him going till he potentially gets back with his wife. However, it is more likely to be for more squalid reasons than that. He'd probably got off with prostitutes regardless. Perhaps the wife knew and chucked him out. Peter O'Mara describes Andrew as a typical Celtic tiger middle-class guy who has fallen down the rabbit hole of his own greed. But backstories aside, I think with the Andrew character, I think this is Stuart Carolan revisiting territory previously visited with the likes of Tommy's friend JP, where it's people on the outside who try to have it their way when it comes to interacting with these gangsters, and it all gets a bit muddled. Whereas John Boy, Darren and Nidge don't deserve what happens to them, they are knee-deep in this world. What they are doing is wrong, and their demise would not happen if they stayed away. But with JP, who just tries to be friends with the gangsters, or Andrew, who at the start at least, just wants to hire a prostitute, nonetheless they both get in over their heads. And to make things even more complicated, neither JP nor Andrew is particularly likeable, so the question of whether you feel sympathy or contempt is even harder to ascertain. So sure, he gets pushed around and belittled by Nidge and Fran, however he himself is way out of line with one of his employees, Anne-Marie. She quite reasonably points out that he is giving his patients the most expensive treatment possible, by making them all get grounds. These were the scenes that the Irish Dental Association took issue with, and he cusses her out and sacks her. His wife extends him an olive branch by telling him that a check bounced, asking him if there's money troubles, and reasonably asking, is this the moment where we scale back our standard of living? He denies there's any issue, until she wants to go away for a weekend, which clashes with his arrangements with Fran and Nidge, and then he rants at her about money troubles, whilst putting himself on a pedestal about how he didn't burden her with them. This is not a nice man. While initially you could say he doesn't go to the police because the only way he'd be able to go is by outing himself as having visited a brothel, he does end up tying his flag to Nidge's mast by offering to come in as a financial advisor of sorts. And he does bring in barrels of lidocaine, which Moynihan and Kieran point out is a criminal offence, so come the season's end, he is complicit. All the same, he suffers a gruesome fate at the hands of somebody who really goes off the deep end this season.
The universe, Nidge. The universe.
Anybody who says Fran is their favourite character is thinking of this season. This is the full Fran. But I have to say, from what I remembered of the show, I remembered Fran as being an almost Huey type character. Huey who delighted in intimidating people and killed for no good reason. Sure, what the audience likes about Fran is echoed by Kieran in the 5th season.
I like Fran. He's a mad bastard.
But there is a method to some of Fran's madness though it may be. In the 3rd season, Fran went from being somebody Nidge will own money to on a whim to his chauffeur, his provocateur, and his yes man. So at this season's start, Fran is acting as the second command. He is to Nidge what Nidge was to John. And yet, he is more than capable of taking charge of the tiger kidnapping situation. He ensures no cigarette butts are left behind as evidence, and his remonstration of Nidge involving Tommy in the job is borne out by the evidence. Tommy does let one of the hostages out of his sight. Tommy returns to the home later that day to get caught, and Tommy name drops Fran under police questioning. It's when he's determined to get Tommy taken out that the friction between Nidge and Fran boils over. But Fran does have a point.
Some people can do their time, but it's fucking rough being locked up. And if I have to do it, I'll do it. No problem, Nidge. But doing it for nothing, because some brain dead fuck is missing a bit of his oblong fucking delate. That won't happen no matter who he's friends with.
So yes, he's a mad bastard, and no, not one of the full-timers. But he's not bereft of logic. Some of the time. The rest of the time he's a scruff. In the tiger kidnapping when the others have balaclavas, he's in a Halloween mask. And no, I do not think this is just what he had lying around. This guy does enjoy that the kids might be spooked. But perhaps the greatest indictment of Fran's character is Dean walks into a pub toilet to see Fran, missing teeth and covered in blood, and there's not a speck of surprise. This is just another day in the life if you're friends with this man. This is where we meet Nolly Hughes, and this is the first of 2 attempts he makes on Fran after Fran slept with his wife while he was locked up. As a result of these attacks, Fran is constantly in pain, he's also paranoid, he's also been smoking Thai stick.
I'm smoking a lot of toy stick.
And he's been drinking poutine. It is perhaps this cocktail that pushes him to the depths of depravity. Fran wants revenge on Nolly, he can't get him hit in Mountjoy, there's no family to intimidate, but Nolly's mother has recently passed away, so Fran wants to dig up his mother and leave her sitting in Nolly's living room for when he gets out. Now, part of the reason Love Hate is so rewatchable and the reason we go back to it is because it's funny.
Right, Nidge. Darling.
This is fucking shit. She's the caterer's in, she still wants me doing the barbecue. There she is now.
But this grave thing is the best stuff.
What I say to the missus?
Don't give up bollocks, Carl.
It's gallows humour, and stuff like this is why, for all its flaws, you can't knock this season. However, there is a thin line between love and hate. Same things make us laugh, make us cry. This might be hilarious here in season 4, but what happens as a result of this in season 5 is the stuff of nightmares. Nidge seemingly is determined to make his predecessor's mistakes, and cuts Fran out of the deal when the shipment comes through Andrew's warehouse come this season's end. His justification? Fran's unpredictable, a liability, and a dead giveaway. However, much like John, Nidge expects it to just be accepted because he's the boss, but the real wedge driver between the two of them is Tommy.
Can you get me a fizzy orange?
Tommy's storyline this season, it's just sad. He's either clueless or screaming in pain. He's most comfortable in the company of teenagers and puppies. When he goes to see the girl he kidnapped earlier that day, in his mind, whatever's left of it that is, he's just seeing if she's alright. Upon receipt of the news that she thought Tommy was kind but Fran was scary, is when he name drops Fran. But there is one brief moment of lucidity mid-season.
I can't remember who I am sometimes.
That's just a short clip, but the full version is dreadfully sad. The opening montage of this episode, set to Ramalama Ding Dong, just shows Tommy's life. He sits there with a vacant expression, smoking, stopping only when he gets shakes. But who can we count on to make everything worse? Nidge, when it comes to Tommy, his mind must be going in a million different directions, but all in the direction of self-preservation.
Ah, Jesus, Nidge.
No, he's fucking grand.
He is willing himself to believe that Tommy is okay again. If Tommy's okay again, what he did isn't so bad then, is it? He's putting Tommy in dangerous situations, but in so doing he gets to pay him and put money in his pocket. So then he can't be so bad then, can he? That literally is Nidge's answer to everything. How does he respond to someone having one of their eyeballs cut out and being partially blind for the rest of their life after a hit he ordered backfires?
Look, I'll pay him for the eye.
And Tommy is a father to his grandnephew. He's family.
Family? Who the fuck knocked the bollocks out of him and put him in hospital?
And him and Tommy and Darren were the best of friends.
But did you not have him clipped?
And the fact that Tommy is being thrown into these horrendous situations with nothing resembling his wits about him gets Siobhan to do the thing she previously wouldn't do. Talk to the police.
I'll do whatever you want me to do. To help you get Nidge.
The introduction of the Gardai this season brings this show closer to The Wire because now screen time is shared with them and you spend almost as much time with the police as you do with the gangsters. The Wire is the highest possible bar to aspire to, but if you're going to ape off of something, you might as well ape off of something that was good in the first place, as opposed to that time RTE decided to rip off something that was rubbish in the first place when they made Fade Street.
How do you not understand? Oh yeah, sorry Danielle, I'm such an uptight bitch.
Comment below if you want a retrospective on that. But as for the influence of The Wire, the opening montage of the second episode, which is set to the birds turn, feels very reminiscent of the intro of the first season of The Wire, with the emphasis on surveillance and the shots of the drug trade and police work carrying on in tandem. Another thing The Wire did that I think these last couple of seasons of Love Hate tried to do is to have each season look at a different institution. So one season of The Wire was about schools, another about longshoremen. With Love Hate, season 3 looks at the IRA, season 4 the Gardai, and season 5 the travelling community. However, the blurb of the DVD for The Wire season 1 was, there are good guys and there are bad guys, sometimes you need more than a badge to tell them apart. And that really isn't the case here, because these Gardai are presented as good people with little to no shades of grey. If you want to be petty, you can look at them doing the graffiti to cause strife between Nidge and Elmo, or them intimidating the man Nidge asked to creep outside one of their houses and say they're not doing things strictly by the book. And tragically enough, I did actually find one person complaining about that on politics.ie in a thread from when this aired in 2013. But overall, they're shown to be decent people as opposed to The Wire. Bureaucracy and friction between the Gardai doesn't become a thing till the 5th season, and while we still go home with Nidge, Fran and Ado, we only see the Gardai at work, and we only get to see the home life of one of them, Moynihan, the main one, for a very brief period in the next season. And I wonder if a trick is missed here. Certainly with the rewatch of this season and of the next, you do adjust more to the Gardai and it's easier to root for them, but this was a criticism at the time. It was quite jarring all of a sudden to be spending so much time with them, and I was quietly hoping Nidge would get away with everything. This is natural because you're 3 to 4 seasons deep with him by this stage. But also, what happens to the show if Nidge does get arrested? Does it become a Prison Break style drama where Nidge tries to break out? Who wants to watch this guy break out of an Irish jail? Oh yeah, that was a good movie, wasn't it? But you still spend so much time with Nidge, and I'm wondering, would it have been better to have spent much less time with him and flip the script on who you root for? This is something which has been attempted in other shows. In the Old Wounds episode of the Batman cartoon, the episode is told from Dick Grayson's perspective as he retells the story of why he left him, and right up until the end, it's almost as if Batman is the villain, when you see his attitude towards Grayson and when you see how aggressively Batman interrogates someone in front of their own children. Season 7, episode 3 of The X-Files, Hungry, is told almost entirely from the perspective of the monster, so when the FBI bursts through the door at the end, they're almost the antagonists, not him. And another Gillian Anderson production, Fagin, the 5th episode of the 4th season of The Crown, which is about the man who broke into the Queen's bedroom in Buckingham Palace, after the intro, is also told entirely from his perspective. And when you see how the system is failing him and how his luck goes from bad to worse and he feels compelled to break in, for the duration of this episode, it's almost as if the baddies are Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher, just like in real life. Were something akin to this to have been attempted, I wonder if it would have worked better or worked at all. After all, this is the sort of storytelling video games do better. But we still spend most of our time with Nidge, and some of the stuff we get is very good, but it's kind of hard to be shocked by Nidge anymore. While Nidge always did terrible things, like pipe bombing Linda after being intimate with her and beating Tommy up, but once he orders the hit on Darren, there is no redeeming him. So for these last 2 seasons, it's just a case of who's going to get him and when. But if you want to root for the police, Moynihan makes it easier.
I want these fuckers put away for a long stretch.
Moynihan is somebody who is genuinely decent, which is not the done thing in a lot of dramas, but that is actually what makes him compelling, and his decency really only becomes truly apparent on the rewatch.
Tommy's not really right, is he? Since he got that terrible beating.
Sure enough, he seems concerned, but is it just because he spots a weak link? Well, once he promises Siobhan he would ensure no harm comes to Tommy, we see who he is. When in the finale, when Tommy collapses in Andrew's warehouse and the consignment is minutes away, he just has to wait a few minutes. He has Nidge red-handed, but the risk Tommy won't make it out is too great, and he calls it in so an ambulance can be got for Tommy as soon as possible, undoing weeks of work and the chance of a lifetime. But then there's this little moment.
There's an ambulance coming for you now, Tommy.
He's a man of his word, for all the good it does him. As for the rest of the Gardai, Kieran, Gavin and Terry, this is where the rewatch comes good because you do meet a lot of them in a short space of time as opposed to the Nidge's gang who you've met gradually over the course of the show. They're at their best when they're trying to cause friction between Nidge and Elmo. They let Elmo go without a charge sheet and thank him for being so helpful. And then graffiti his neighbourhood and Elmo doesn't react well, leaving his phone switch off, which just aggravates Nidge, and he does bench Elmo for a period. However, something I have to say frustrates me about this season is this story arc doesn't go anywhere. This story arc leads to this moment.
I was looking at that graffiti on the wall. I was saying, thank fucking God that's not me.
What graffiti?
And then nothing. Nidge doesn't suspect the police are onto him, the opposite in fact.
Stupid coppers haven't a clue.
And then in season 5, Elmo becomes the new second in command, so this story arc is great in the moment, but it really has no resolution. But it is fun to watch the Gardai do their thing, and you can easily root for them to get Nidge. The ones who are decidedly less easy to root for are Danno and Lizzy.
We've only got one chance and I'm fucked if it's tracked back to me.
You know what's funny? In this interview, Quillivan Dunn said after Love Hate 3 she'd be the most hated woman in Ireland. But I have to say, I bear no ill will towards her for killing Darren. And I don't think many do, because her reasoning was sound. He did kill her brother. All our contempt and blame for Darren's death is directed towards the Weasel. This season, she is out to kill Nidge under the nose of the IRA because Nidge is still paying them off. And she is being funded by Danno. Danno has been kicked out of his wife's house, thank goodness, and he's been blacklisted of sorts by the IRA. So he has nothing left except Nidge. However, it's impossible to root for Danno because he's awful, and I am glad that his story is brought to an end here. Darragh McManus wrote in The Independent that was a mistake because the IRA storyline had been the most exciting one, but that is precisely why I'm glad it ends here, because any attempt to resurrect it would have been a letdown. Regarding Lizzy, however, while we feel for Lizzy, Nidge really didn't do anything to her. The only time they ever saw each other was at the commemoration, where they didn't even speak. The more I think about it, Lizzy is more pitiful than anything else. She's not working, she has no boyfriend, and evidently struggles in that department, if how she expressed her feelings for Darren is anything to go by, and she has no brothers left. She still has her values. When Nidge's mother dies, in spite of the funeral being the perfect opportunity, that is the one line she will not cross. And it is Lizzy's story this scene that gives us one of the standout scenes of the whole show, not just this season, where Lizzy, accompanied by Wayne, breaks into Nidge's house while he's got a dose. This really is a wonderful little idea. What happens when a gangster calls in sick? For most, a sick day is a mild inconvenience a lot of the time. Nidge, on the other hand, is on the move for half of the season, sleeping in hotels, the brothel, Janet's, anywhere but home. So a sick day isn't just nauseating and taking a toll on his body, it's also frightening the life out of him. And then just through pure luck, having gotten up to use the toilet, Nidge spots the would-be assassin and hides under Warren's bed. Not before grabbing a samurai sword, however, which is just brilliant. If you've been paying attention, this is the Kill Bill replica he was playing with in John Boy's apartment 18 episodes ago. For a brief moment in the 6th episode of the 2nd season, we can see after his death, John Boy's apartment has been ransacked. I always interpreted this to mean every lowlife in Dublin know that there's an arcade machine, TVs and pool tables up for grabs. Seems Nidge picked himself up a souvenir, first come first served. The whole encounter is incredibly tense, because not only is Nidge hiding, he has just spent the past while spluttering and could cough and sneeze at any moment. But also lying under Warren's bed, he is eye level with the landing, and that's pretty impressive considering this isn't a set. This is someone's gaff. The relief when they get out the door is palpable. However, this leads directly into what is one of the worst scenes in the show for me personally. Lizzy, distracted by Wayne, crashes into someone, and after this man expresses his frustration and insults her, there's a random act of violence, and she's arrested. Now, when this happened with Huey, it was very convenient, but at least it was consistent with his character. When it happened with Fran, it was exactly what he would do, and it served a greater purpose to the story. This is none of those things. This is the worst one. At the end of the 3rd season, the little we see of Lizzy after she shoots the man she felt something for, there's no wavering. She's in control. So this is a woman who can keep it together even when putting a bullet in the head of a man she once desired, and now she's getting all agitated over road rage. One could say the death of her brothers has affected her, and that is certainly her legal defense in the 1st episode of the 5th season. But it was closer to the event when she did Darren in, and she just wasn't like this. This is one of those scenes that makes me think series 4 and 5 should have been one long season, because this really only exists so Lizzy can be written out of the rest of the season. And then come season 5, Lizzy being killed off, while a brief scene, it is used to show that Nidge, aided by Terrence and Polly, is getting back on track. So I like that, but there'd be no need for this scene if it was just one longer season. This scene is just used so that Lizzy is out of the picture for the rest of the season, so that Nidge can go home to Trish instead of going to the home of his new love interest, Janet.
What's the towel for?
My knees are at me.
So Janet's in the 3rd season pretty much from the get-go as it happens, but she's just the custodian of the brothel. This season, with Nidge spending the first half on the run and more time with the Brazzers, he gets closer with Janet. Janet is a character Stuart Carolan cares a lot about, and she's given really good material in this season and the next. She's caring, and she's really all Nidge needs, is someone to look after him. But the attraction of someone like Janet, she knows he's married, and she knows he's sleeping around because it's her girls he's with. She knows how his money is made, she's on his payroll. So she is the mythical thing where she sees the full picture, knows not to expect anything, and cares for him in any event. However, amusingly enough, while Nidge is mourning the loss of Darren, he finds comfort in the arms of someone who has Darren's problem, trying to be kind in an unkind business. When Andrew first gets sick in the room, it's put to Janet whether or not she wants to send one of the lads in. She holds back, knowing all too well they'd eat him alive. Only after Andrew has thumped her does she send Nidge in, and even in so doing makes excuses for him. And despite his being Fran from the business, she's still soft on him. The does not compute moment comes when Debbie and Denise overdose, and Nidge wants to leave the bodies to decay. To call the police would blow the lid on the brothel. It's calculated, but not cold, because Nidge is hot with rage.
So we just leave them there?
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Fucking watch me.
Because he can't use Debbie as a mule anymore, something which comes as a bit of a blow to Ado. Ado is quite the character, because he is somebody who, from his first appearance onwards, consistently demonstrates shocking behaviour. He forces himself on Debbie when she's strung out, he's a bit of a voyeur, his eating habits are disgusting, his drug habits are even worse, he betrays Darren, and yet...
Here does the stripper put out, Ado? She's wanna be out though, she's getting paid.
I'm not a prostitute.
Fucking her.
Shut your fucking mouth.
He might be the funniest character in this whole thing.
Who's banging me, ma?
Who's your mom?
I'm telling you who she is. She's fucking married. And separated. Be fucking more if the husband found out. Use bastards to tell him and all. Ah, fuck that.
I think a lot of people might remember Ado as a character with not a lot of depth, an unremarkable drug addict who says he'll get clean and never does. But this is the season where he's robbed of a chance at redemption. After he uses Nadine's pee in lieu of his own for a drug test, he learns he's to have a baby. Ado is excited by the prospect, although it does seem he's excited by the prospect of kids Lonstad, rather than kids with Nadine. He doesn't remember things like her mother being dead, and he consistently misreads the fact that she doesn't want this kid. But when Ado has the near miss with the police in the finale and is faced with the fact he just avoided 20 years in prison, he He resolves not only to get clean, but to get out of the life altogether. His justification being he's got a kid on the way. Only be told there's no baby on the way after Nadine went to England. Would Ado have gotten clean and gone on the straight and narrow? Almost certainly not. The more likely outcome is his remaining a degenerate who's nice to his kids, much like his employer.
You're a great lad, Warren, you know that?
It's sometimes just a turn of phrase when someone says the one good thing you could say about him is. But genuinely, the one good thing you could say about Nidge is he does seem like a caring father, and perhaps even a good one. In the second season, upon receipt of the news that Warren is being picked on at school, while what's more wounding to him is the insult to his own ego.
Can't believe it. A child of mine getting picked on.
It does result in him taking Warren to boxing, and is that not a good lesson for a son, to toughen up in response to aggression, even if the father does it for reasons of hubris? I like that in this season we get one scene of him checking on John when he's sleeping, because otherwise all these scenes are devoted to him and Warren. But this scene, for example, when he's with Warren, he's genuinely affectionate, genuinely interested in what Warren has to tell him about his school friends. Contrast this with the scene with the only friends he has left.
He's on that other stuff as well to stop his tits growing. What do you call it?
That's in your post cycle.
What? The fuck you was on about?
Nidge had two good friends, and he made a mess of that. He now has the John Boy problem of people who make him feel alone, and despite all proclamations to Tommy and Siobhan about the importance of family, his love of family seems to extend only towards those in his line of work. Upon receipt of the news that his mother has had a stroke, he will not visit the hospital when his brother and the rest of his family are there. Once again, the show omits information, and you get years worth of context purely from facial expressions. Contrast this with Kin, where people do just out and out say what they think of their family members.
I mean, Eric's. He's a good boy. But he's not you.
When Nidge learns his mother has passed away, the look on his face is not one of grief. Instead it's saying, that's all I need now, isn't it? Only in the church, when he comes face to face with it, does he shed a single tear. The little story arc around the death of Nidge's mother does not impact the overall story of the show, but it's good stuff, and it's something the structure and pace of this season permits. It would have been impossible to fit something like this into the mile-a-minute third season. But to be fair, the people who disliked this season didn't dislike it for this stuff. What was a point of contention was, for example, an excess of scenes of Nidge getting in and out of cars, and shots of cranes and the like at Dublin Port. Now the car thing I will defend, one being Nidge is on the move and he is typically switching vehicles, but usually the reason we're watching him get in and out of cars is because the police are watching him get in and out of cars. However, I will not defend the shots of the docks because these go on for a while, and it's not just this. Scenes like this one of Tommy going up and down the stairs go on too long as well. But what at the time was criticised for being anticlimactic, now we have the fifth season, we can see how things pay off and we look at things in a different light. This is true of Nolie Hughes, but it rings truest for Patrick. Whenever you're rewatching Love Hate and you get to the start of the fourth episode of the fourth season and you see this guy, you know you're approaching the end game. Respectively though, while Patrick appears in the fourth episode, Nidge does not fully come to grips with who he is till the fifth episode. The whole episode goes by before Nidge remembers this is the man who made this pipe bomb that hit Fran's house. So if you were the biggest Love Hate fan watching this at the time, you could have spotted it, and to be honest, I'm not sure many did. I certainly didn't the first time, but I took a gander at some of the forums discussing this in October 13 when this aired, and no one mentioned it, not that I could see. What I could see was the Politics.ie forum finding some way of making a chat about Love Hate come back to Charles Haughey, which is amusing in hindsight when you see what the cast of Love Hate did next. Erin Qui, what I find most interesting is when Nidge goes to see Patrick in season 2. I swear I can hear him putting a Dublin accent on.
You know me, Fran, I never said nothing about nobody.
Alright, you like this, right? You got about 10 seconds. Then you run like fuck, okay? It's got a proper bop.
So perhaps the traveller aspect of Patrick's character had yet to be identified, so this is potentially a continuity error? However, I have a no prize for this. Perhaps the reason Patrick has a Dublin accent in this scene is to conceal his traveller origins, which wouldn't be out of the question, because having listened to a few John Connors interviews, this is something he has done in his personal life. Throughout the 5 seasons, we never see Nidge kill anyone directly. This is the season where we see it's not for lack of trying, and evidently he doesn't have the temperament or the wherewithal for it. His solution to get Patrick to come to the door is to start bashing it down and yelling, and when he does pick up his gun, he can't tell the clip has fallen out. Patrick is the apex of Nidge making the same mistakes John Boy made. From their 2 encounters, Patrick makes it abundantly clear that he keeps himself to himself, that for his business to work, he operates almost like a confessional box, lest people be using their weapons against each other. Whereas the IRA weren't looking for conflict initially, they had no qualms about if it went that way.
Think it'd be cardio?
Doesn't matter.
Patrick is more than capable of defending himself, but he genuinely doesn't want to. He has kids to think about. But while at first glance it appears he is fearful of his own life, when you see the 5th season, I think it's more he's trying to avoid what this will take out of him. The depths and the extents Patrick goes to track Nidge down and to defend his family show why this man would want to avoid this situation if he could. Not because he might lose, because of how much it takes to win. However, while Nidge tries and fails to take Patrick out, Patrick then boards up the house and comes to England, only to come back an episode later. And this is the stuff that brings the season down down. This is the problem when you know your show has another year and you can spread things out. The only reason Patrick goes to England is to get him out of the way for the finale. So this is the stuff in this season that I don't like, but the stuff I find more frustrating is the stuff that's not in it. At the end of series 3, Nidge is given at least a chunk of his savings to the IRA and has to continue regular payments. Ado is told that people are slower to repay debts, and several thousand euro is left in Darren's jacket. At the very start of season 5, Nidge is flown to Spain to request a loan. If someone saw these two book endings without the 4th season in between, they might think the 4th season consisted of Nidge's finances dwindling, and that is just not shown to be the case here. Whether it's the tiger kidnapping or bringing the shipment in, Nidge is getting money. But it all seems to be business as usual. When Andrew asks for a payment or when Tommy has legal bills, Nidge just throws money at it. What we do not get is any scene that indicates he's in money trouble, and we really should, because it just adds more tension and gets us more invested. If you look at the battle at the end of 7 Samurai, we're told that 40 bandits are set to attack the village, so each time one is taken out, you're counting it down in your head. Or in the first song in the movie Wonka, as the song goes on, he gradually has less and less silver in his pocket till the song's end, which perfectly tees up why he gets coerced into staying at the boarding house. Just having more information like this can get us more invested, and I think the opening of season 5 where Nidge goes to Spain, effectively to be bailed out, would hit harder because it's the loss of his own sovereignty and would strengthen Nidge's storyline in that season where he has someone to working for him who he can't just boss around and how that eats him up. Lovehay even gave us a glimpse of what this would look like with John Boy explaining his finances in response to Fran's pitch for compensation.
What if he wants the money now?
Don't have it now. That's the truth. You can tell him that. Got cab up me hole. Issuing seizure orders every other day cost me a fortune to contest. They've done me bollocks in all the investments, negative equity, every one of them. And they slapped a tax bill on me that's on top of the gear getting found. What do you think I am? The Aga Khan? Fucking compo money?
So this season 4 chat has been a bit of a ramble, and that's kind of what this season is like. There's so many disparate things happening, and you get to the 6th episode of the season and it's got this cracker of an opening montage with a Fleetwood Mac song and it's getting you all amped up, but then what's it building to? Patrick getting the boat, Nidge changing his car, meeting with Keith Duffy, not even to sell him cocaine, just to ask if he wants to buy some when they have it. But this isn't a finale, it's the midpoint of a longer story, and that's why I think they really have missed a trick with how this whole thing is structured. If this and the next season were one big piece and there was an episode a week later, this would not be a problem. This 6th episode is not a bad one. In fact, it is quite good. It is genuinely tense towards the end when there's the question mark over whether Moynihan will bust in to save Tommy or not. But I can see why people thought it was an anticlimax. However, the anticlimax that I enjoy is after his arrest, Nidge is in for questioning, and finally, after pursuing him all season, Nidge and Moynihan come face to face. It's the Heat diner scene moment. And what do they have to say to each other after all of this?
What the fuck you looking at?
Nothing. Because why would Nidge say anything to the cops? And then the season caps off with the scene that, honestly, I think just mystified most of us, where Nidge pees on the Gardai's milk to get thrown in a cell, and then starts ripping at his skin and screaming his head off. Is it an FU because they have no evidence on him? Is it the only place he feels safe? It's a memorable moment, but I'm still not sure about it. And then it's over. What a mixed bag. There's undeniably good stuff, but it's kind of less than the sum of its parts. While the ratings were higher than they had ever been, critically this show was reviewed much harsher than previous seasons. It's even gotten worse reviews than the first season. I think it's much better than that, but I can understand more was expected of it. Audience reception online to this season seems to have been pretty mixed, but it was still love-hate, so we knew we would be coming back. What we didn't know was it would be for the last time with season 5.